Good afternoon and welcome to episode 2 of Inside Out, a monthly webcast where Thinka's co-founders and respective CEO and CEO, Ben and Lee, talk through all the weird and wonderful, hard and human parts of business and leadership. Today we're focusing on 3 big questions. What does it mean to be an inclusive leader? How do we help neurodivergent employees? And is there a link between inclusion, performance, and the bottom line?
Interestingly, there's been some work done by the Diversity Council Australia on inclusion and what it looks like for employees. So a lot of employees have reported that they feel that their teams are non-inclusive, more so than before the pandemic. There's a rise of about 8%, and also a belief that their manager is non-inclusive, and that's risen by 6%. So there might be a lot of factors for that, given that we were very intentional about connecting during the pandemic and had a lot of things in place to make sure that we kept that camaraderie strong throughout that shared experience. But I think it's interesting that we're seeing that rise before and after, because if you think about it, you would make the assumption that we were probably far less inclusive before the pandemic than we would be afterwards. So I think it's really important that we talk about inclusion and we put it back on the table. I mean, obviously, there's probably been more of a push after the pandemic to reinvent business models, to think about commercial viability, to manage this difficult economy, etc. But I guess today's argument is about inclusion being important to both performance and the bottom line. So that's where we want to get to, with a real focus on neurodivergent employees.
The D&I strategy is really sitting next to a whole heap of competing priorities that you mentioned before, whether they be the new way of working that we've all had to basically invent and then reinvent for some organizations, the strategic direction, the alignment to purpose, the different things that emerging generations might actually want out of their career as well is a really big factor as a growing population of the workforce now. The rise in tech and AI, and that really took a lot of airtime in a lot of organizations as well. And I think, the cost of doing business and the cost of living pressures in and amongst all of that has meant that the business attention span has been stretched. So I don't think it's necessarily being forgotten. It's just maybe it just needs a bit more of a continued tactical focus. And the key word I'm going to emphasize there is a tactical focus, because I think sometimes you have to take a couple of steps to the side to take a couple of steps forward. The question we ask is, what does it mean to be an inclusive leader? It actually goes beyond advocacy. It goes into the things that leader or the leaders within organizations actually do to drive an inclusive culture. So having leaders who can really invite everyone in to a really good collaboration session, or a really good, maybe it is a hybrid environment and you do have some people that do work remote, but making sure that everyone's not just seat is at the table, but voice is in the call. And that's a thing that's got to change. So leaders don't just become people who maybe need to run the work in progress meeting or really make sure that there is momentum in the team. They're really facilitating the conversation. Is everyone heard? Am I bringing everyone in? How am I actually creating that?
It may just be a simple adjustment, as in sending out the notes in advance or adjusting the communication style. So you give those neurodivergent employees a bit of time to reflect on what the agenda is or the key questions to answer are. Making assumptions about people's abilities and being paternalistic in putting in measures or special treatment, that's not inclusion. Mm-hmm. Inclusion is working with that individual, understanding that every individual, including neurodivergent people, are unique individuals with unique needs. And adjustments don't have to be big things. It could be noise-cancelling headphones, a quiet space to work. It could be a bit of additional training in a different format on something because written or verbal instructions don't work, for example. But it starts with that conversation, and then you want to move it into action. If you're going to put something on the table, make sure that you deliver on it. And oftentimes you'll find a lot of these adjustments are suitable for a lot of people. So if you have a bit of flex on start and finish time, if you're an organisation that can do that, so that your employee can avoid the rush hour overwhelm. If you can have flex there, you can have flex for parents or guardians of children who are dropping them off at daycare or school, or there might be somebody who's studying their masters, for example, who might need to attend a class in the morning. So flex is for everyone. Ben and I both have ADHD, diagnosed as adults. We had a father who was your classic ADHD, hyperactive, constantly restless, always on the phone. excellent at sports, always using his hands. Class clown, very funny, very charismatic. So you kind of typical, I guess, ADHD stereotype. But Ben and I have very different expressions of that.
What I have learned more than anything is how much I have learned to control how I show up in certain environments or how I will protect my own working style. So what do I mean by that? I, pre-pandemic, didn't even realize I was doing it at the time, would go to the office, but I would really use my office time to interact and engage with others. I really wouldn't use any of the time in the office to do heavy focused thinking work. I really would use it to be class clown, but people probably call me more Captain Serious these days than class clown, but I definitely knew, or I've definitely come to learn, that was a form of masking for me. So I was actually going to the office and portraying a certain persona because my brain actually just couldn't focus and it couldn't actually tune into the work. So I couldn't sit at a computer and think about doing deep work when I was in the office because I'm really like sensory and noises for me are a real distraction now. So when I'm in the office now, I've got to have music on, but when I'm at home, I've got to have it be really quiet. That's how I do my best work. So actually learning more about it myself, both as someone who was diagnosed, but also as a leader, also helps you really understand there are light and dark sides to this. But when you can just create those tiny tweaks in someone's environment or working style, the results can be exponential. I spoke at a conference a few months ago and I dropped a line around, if your recruitment mantra is find the culture fit, forget it. Like, what we want to be thinking about now is culture add. How does my recruitment pipeline add to my fabric of my organization, my culture, rather than inevitably looking for the fit, the person that's just going to fit in or is just going to be culturally aligned. I've heard that so many times. And I just want people to challenge that a little bit more now and go, it's all about add. It's all about the different types of people we can bring into the organization to create different thinking. But alongside that, we've got to have leaders that are skilled enough to be able to work with that very diverse workforce and be able to embrace everything that comes with that as well.
Obviously, there's that push for innovation, that creative conflict that you have when you allow different perspectives, when you allow for dissent.
Yeah,
because
100%.
Consensus is what is going to kill creativity, innovation, etc. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I mean, we fight all the time, Ben, and we might not talk for a couple of hours, but then we're good. But I think it's about, robust, allowing for that constructive harmony, not that false harmony where you might have some disagreements and some argy-bargy, but you come out the other end with a more robust solution.
Yeah.
So you get that with diverse teams, with inclusive teams. You also get stronger camaraderie and bonds. There's kind of no BS in the relationship. Everything's on the table. You also get better relationships with your clients and customers as well when you have an inclusive team, and more discretionary effort. All of these things lead to better performance and therefore kind of aiding that bottom line figure.
Leaders with tactics is the key thing I always think right now. D&I is no longer about strategy. It's about the tactics on the ground to enable the strategy and how do we get the people doing what we need them to do, just so as it becomes business as usual. It's not a thing.